Alabama has had quite the lineage of quarterbacks over the last couple of years. You've had guys like Jalen Hurts, Tua, Mac Jones, Bryce Young, and now Jalen Milroe. All these guys have or will be going off to the NFL and have done a marvelous job while in a Crimson Tide uniform. The Crimson Tide will be looking for a new quarterback in 2025, and luckily they have a guy who's been sitting on the bench who's ready to take over and I think become a star in the SEC. In a world where a ton of players just transfer when they don't play right away, Ty Simpson is quite the opposite. He got his first big-time offer from Jim Harbaugh as an 8th grader, so you'd think a guy like him would be spoiled and want to move around quickly. Instead, he has not. He's done the opposite. He became a 5-star recruit, a child prodigy quarterback, and has sat on the bench for 3 years waiting for his turn at Alabama. Today, I want to introduce you to the next great Crimson Tide quarterback as we're going to go through who Ty Simpson is, talk about how he became a 5-star recruit, and what I think he could do in the future for the Tide. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about Ty Simpson. Okay, so before we get started, be sure to quickly go down below and let me know what quarterback or player I should feature for the 2025 season. I'm trying to make a playlist of features on players who I think are going to blow up next year or names you need to know, so go ahead and go down and drop a name and check out the playlist. Okay, so in order to understand how Ty Simpson got to this point, we first need to go back in time. You don't get too many 5-star recruits coming out of the small city of Martin, Tennessee. Luckily, his dad was a college football coach though, and his grandfather played at Ole Miss. The first time Ty Simpson visited the University of Tennessee was 8 years prior to him being in 8th grade. He said he cried in the tunnel after the Vols defeated UT Martin 50-0. Simpson's father, Jason, was the coach at UT Martin. Like many good coaches' sons, Ty ended up becoming a quarterback and showed flash at an early age. When he was in 8th grade, him and his dad were driving back to Martin from the city of Nashville. Ty had just finished his 7-on-7 game when he got a message. It was from one of the premier college football programs and its head coach, Jim Harbaugh. Ty, who was an 8th grader at Martin Middle School, could not believe it. Ty had tweeted out videos showing him go through footwork and throwing drills, but apparently it piqued Jim Harbaugh's interest so much that when Ty visited, he ended up extending an offer. This was pretty insane. Ty said, quote, "I really didn't believe it at first. I was like, oh, he's just being nice because he knows my dad, and I was like, they aren't going to offer me, but then I went up there for a visit, and it was crazy, and they happened to offer me." His dad said as a father he was proud to see Ty get the offer, but he was aware it would not help him get on the football field. What's crazy though is football was never at the forefront for Ty, as he also played baseball in middle school, and over the years he became fond of football. Ty said, quote, "At first I thought I was going to be a baseball player. I really didn't think I was built for football like I was, but then me and my dad were throwing one day, and he was like, Ty, I really think you need to start working with my coaches more to see where it goes." As I said, everybody knew who Ty Simpson was before he ever took a snap in high school, as he had gotten multiple offers, including that Michigan offer. He was considered a child prodigy-like quarterback because he got offered in 8th grade. Quickly, Simpson was on the map of every single SEC school and schools all across the country, and this was because of how mature he was and how developed he was at his age. Because of how much buzz he was generating as a 15-year-old, he was aware he'd have a target on his back. He said, quote, "It means a lot. With all the hype beforehand, we all know at the end of the day, I have to perform on Friday nights and win a lot of football games." When he eventually got to high school, it was a complete reality check though, as teams were keying on him and trying to find ways to make his life difficult. For a majority of reasons, that's exactly what happened, and Simpson said he had to learn early on to keep his head up and battle adversity. In his first season, the Chargers went 2-8, and there were plenty of ups and downs. He finished the season with over 1,000 passing yards, but had a 48% completion percentage and threw 12 interceptions compared to just 8 touchdowns. By the time he was a junior though, things got a little bit better, as he ended up throwing for 1,900 yards with 20 touchdowns, while also rushing for over 300 yards and 7 more scores. Eventually, with offers everywhere, he would have to make a decision. But things were difficult. There was a recruiting dead period due to everything going on in the world, and he said, quote, "It is a struggle. I don't want to go in making a blind decision in probably the biggest decision of my life. I hope the NCAA looks at it and decides that we need to allow certain people or a certain amount of people to go on visits." Finally, as a senior, Ty put it all together as he threw for 3,000 yards, 44 touchdowns, and ran for 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns. Not only that, but he also won a state championship, and he was seen as the top quarterback in his class, and every school in the nation wanted him. At this time, I was a year into doing YouTube, and I remember when Ty Simpson was actually making his commitment in 2021. Where was he going to go? Well, there were a couple of options. His head coach in high school was a guy by the name of Jared Neal, and he was aware of how special of a moment this was, as there's only 500 people in this town. They had produced exactly 4 Power 5 football players in its history, and they all had made the 5-hour drive to Knoxville. The Vols were expected to land him, but this was all before Jeremy Pruitt was fired. Ty said, quote, "I honestly was a lean towards Tennessee throughout most of the recruiting process, and I would say I thought about going there because of the relationships I had and how comfortable I was with the people there." From there, Simpson's recruitment became an Alabama and Clemson race, and he eventually chose the Crimson Tide over the Tigers and the Volunteers. Neal said he had a gut feeling it would be the Tide, and it was confirmed before he reached for the hat. Simpson said he made his decision Thursday night in an interview with CBS Sports, and his high school coach said, quote, "I knew it was Alabama because he was talking to Coach Saban last night." Neal ended up playing quarterback for his father and had a lot to say about what made Ty special. He said he was the most talented player and the hardest worker on the team. So why Bama? He said, quote, "Whether I start my freshman year or my 5th year senior year, I don't really care. It's just the fact I get to go down there and learn from the best coach of all time." He was one of 3 5-stars in Alabama's recruiting class, alongside both Jeremiah Alexander and Jahad Campbell. Some were worried about his level of competition, though, but scouts were not. According to 24/7 Sports, Ty Simpson was a 5-star recruit, the number 3 quarterback, and the 26th best player in the class of 2022. So how would Ty end up doing in Tuscaloosa? Well, let's take a look. Okay, so when Ty arrived at Alabama, he would be sitting on the bench. In 2022, he'd sit behind Bryce Young, who ended up becoming the number 1 overall pick, and then in 2023, he'd be stuck behind Jalen Milroe. He ended up playing very sparingly throughout his first few years at Alabama, as let's go back to 2022 first. He was given a lot of hype, obviously, but he was just never going to see the field because of Bryce, and then Jalen was the natural backup, so when Bryce got hurt, Jalen was the guy who was thrown in. Simpson still, though, got an opportunity to appear in a couple of games as he played against Austin Peay, Vanderbilt, and Utah State. He ended up going 4 of 5 for 35 yards. Nothing too flashy. Going into 2023, though, as I said, Bryce was the number 1 overall pick, so Ty was thrusted into a big quarterback battle. They had 2 true freshmen in Dylan Lonergan and Eli Holstein. You had Jalen Milroe, who had been waiting a couple of years, and then they brought in former 5-star quarterback from Notre Dame, Tyler Buchner. This came with offensive coordinator Tommy Rees, so some thought Buchner had the inside track to the job, whereas others believed in Milroe because he was the guy who was waiting and was the backup last year. Some thought Ty Simpson had an outside opportunity because he was a 5-star and had a ton of hype. Except I never really heard many people talk about Ty in 2023. He would ultimately get a couple of opportunities as he played the majority of his snaps in 2023 against USF, going 5 of 9 for 73 yards. He ended up having a rushing touchdown in that game, and also had a rushing score in Week 1 against Middle Tennessee. But Jalen Milroe ended up taking the job back and had an incredible 2023 season in which he led the Tide to the college football playoff. From there, Ty pretty much did nothing throughout the rest of the season, as he played sparingly against both Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Chattanooga. In total, he went 11 of 20 for 179 yards with 2 rushing touchdowns. In his first 2 years, he had still never thrown for a passing score. Going into 2024, Nick Saban had retired, and all of a sudden, things were kind of thrown on their head. Some thought Ty could transfer, but I guess he really believed in Kalen DeBoer, and he wanted to be part of the Crimson Tide. He decided to stick around in Tuscaloosa, but with Jalen Milroe coming back, he pretty much had no shot. Now he was going to take Jalen's position, though, as he'd end up being the backup and prepare to try to be the starter in 2025. This past season, Ty ended up playing a little bit, as he went 14 of 25 for 167 yards and 1 rushing touchdown, which came in Week 1 against Western Kentucky. He also ended up having an embarrassing moment, as he had a huge run but dropped the ball before crossing the goal line. That was kind of sad. But even though Jalen Milroe was absolutely horrible in that game against Oklahoma, Ty never got an opportunity to play in that one, and now all of a sudden, he's going to be the guy in 2025. At least that's what pretty much everybody is saying. In a world in which the transfer portal has become rampant and players give up quickly, Ty, I think, knows his time has finally come, and he has been preparing for 3 years. I'm really high on this guy because I think he has a lot of character, and I love how he has stuck around. He was a 5-star and a child prodigy, and instead of acting like a spoiled brat, he's instead waited his turn, gotten better, and tried to be a better leader. That's why I think Ty could end up being one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC next year, and definitely has what it takes to get Alabama football back. No one's saying that the Tide have fallen off, but last year didn't exactly go according to plan. Some are a little bit skeptical of Kalen DeBoer right now, but Ty is exactly the kind of guy that I would want as my quarterback. He's patient, he's waited his turn, and he has plenty of talent. He's got a good arm, he's got good size, he's athletic, and can command the team. Do I think he'll put up crazy numbers like Bryce Young? Probably not. Will he probably make the plays that they need to win? I think so. And when DeBoer came in, the Alabama quarterback room shifted a lot, as Eli Holstein transferred to Pitt and became a starter. Dylan Lonergan ended up spending one more year there before he now transferred to Boston College. Julian Sayin ended up transferring to Ohio State. And now, currently, the Tide have three big-time quarterbacks in the room. You have Ty, who's going to be the front runner. Then you have Austin Mack. Austin Mack was a late riser in the class of 2023 and ended up transferring to Bama alongside Kalen DeBoer. He's super lanky and has a ton of potential, but I'm not quite sure if he's polished enough to win the job, and I don't know if he'll ever actually start a game for the Tide. Behind him, you have Keelan Russell, who's actually one of the most highly rated quarterbacks we've seen in years. After originally being committed to SMU, Russell absolutely blew up, and some think he'll be better than Bryce Underwood. I don't think he'll end up playing this season, and that's why I think it's Ty Simpson's job, and he's waited his turn, and I think he's going to blow up this season. Obviously, he could play a couple of games and be terrible and get benched, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Ty knows exactly what he's doing, and he has all the tools both mentally and physically to become the next great Tide quarterback, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do next. But what do you guys think? If you're a Bama fan, what do you think of Ty Simpson, and who's another player I should spotlight for this upcoming season? I plan to do a feature on Austin Simmons from Ole Miss in the coming weeks, so be sure to let me know which quarterback I should also preview next. Also, before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.